The Euphrates River is drying.
Look at this.
Excuse me.
Look at this.
Oh, God. I can't believe this.
Look.
This is incredible.
at this.
After severe drought caused parts of the Euphrates River to retreat, a discovery beneath the exposed earth began drawing attention around the world. Ancient archives, gigantic chains, and terrifying inscriptions warning that something had once been sealed below the river. Some discoveries appeared disturbingly similar to ancient stories connected to the fallen beings described in apocalyptic traditions and the Book of Enoch. But were these chambers only symbolic remains of forgotten myths or evidence that ancient civilizations believed something dangerous was truly buried beneath the Euphrates? So before we descend deeper into the cave and uncover what was allegedly sealed, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. For months, the Euphrates River had been retreating deeper into itself. Across parts of Iraq and Syria, entire stretches of cracked earth appeared where water had flowed for thousands of years. Rusted debris, collapsed stone walls, and fragments of forgotten settlements slowly emerged from beneath layers of dried mud. Local fishermen along one isolated section of the river near the Syrian border said the landscape no longer looked natural. They described long fractures spreading through the riverbed as though the ground itself had started pulling apart. The discovery happened completely by accident. A small geological survey team sent to examine instability near the newly exposed terrain noticed cold air rising from a narrow split in the rock. At first, they believed it was nothing more than a sinkhole created by erosion. But when a drone equipped with thermal imaging was lowered into the opening, the camera revealed something impossible: a massive hollow space extending far beneath the Euphrates. Hours later, excavators widened the entrance enough for a small team to descend. The cave did not look natural. The walls were too smooth in certain places. Sections of stone looked blackened, as if exposed to intense heat long ago. Strange carvings stretched across the entrance chamber, partially buried beneath centuries of sediment. And deeper inside the darkness, the drone lights briefly captured what appeared to be 4 separate passageways branching away from a massive circular chamber at the center of the cave. But what unsettled the researchers most was what they found carved directly above those tunnels. 4 symbols, different from one another, yet somehow connected. The deeper the team moved into the cave, the stranger the structure became. At first, researchers assumed the smooth walls near the entrance had been shaped naturally over time by underground water erosion. But that explanation started falling apart almost immediately. Certain sections of the tunnel showed sharp edges and symmetrical cuts too precise to be accidental. Marks resembling tool impressions appeared beneath layers of mineral buildup, suggesting someone, or many people, had worked inside this cave thousands of years ago. And then the main chamber finally came into view. The cavern was enormous. Drone scans later estimated the circular room stretched nearly the size of a cathedral beneath the Euphrates riverbed. The ceiling disappeared into darkness far above, while the floor was covered in layers of dust, shattered pottery, fragments of bone, and strange black stones unlike anything commonly found in the surrounding region. But none of that was the most unsettling part. At the exact center of the chamber stood a massive circular platform carved directly into the stone floor. Burn marks surrounded it in rings, as though fires had once burned there repeatedly for generations. 4 tunnels extended outward from the platform toward the north, south, east, and west. Each one marked by a different symbol carved above the entrance. The first resembled a star falling downward. The second looked like a pair of wings surrounding an eye. The third appeared almost like a weapon or spear. And the final symbol looked disturbingly close to the shape of an insect. Researchers initially believed the carvings represented ancient Mesopotamian deities or tribes. But one translator working with the team reportedly noticed similarities between several symbols and descriptions found in fragments of apocalyptic literature connected to the Book of Enoch and early Near Eastern myths about the Watchers being said to have descended from heaven before humanity's great corruption. What made the chamber even stranger was the age inconsistency. Carbon dating samples taken from torches, ash remains, and wooden fragments produced results separated by centuries, in some cases over 1,000 years apart. It was as though the cave had not belonged to one civilization, but had been revisited again and again across different eras. Then came another disturbing detail: footprints. Some clearly belonged to humans. Others resembled large animals dragged across the floor. Even stranger, there were no returning tracks. As the team continued documenting the chamber, ground-penetrating radar revealed additional hollow spaces far deeper beneath the cave system, levels that did not appear on any known geological survey of the Euphrates region. And when one drone was briefly sent into the tunnel marked by the falling star symbol, its camera captured something sitting deep in the darkness before the signal abruptly died. The tunnel marked by the falling star symbol was colder than the rest of the cave. As the team moved deeper beneath the Euphrates, the air became unnaturally still. Dust covered the ground so thickly that every footstep echoed through the narrow stone passage. The walls gradually changed as well. Unlike the rough surfaces near the entrance chamber, these walls appeared polished in places, dark and reflective like volcanic glass. Strange lines carved into the stone stretched overhead in spiraling patterns that looked almost like flames descending from the sky. Then the passage suddenly opened. The chamber beyond was massive, yet strangely empty. At the center stood the throne the drone had briefly captured earlier, carved from a single block of black stone. The seat itself was enormous, far larger than what would have been practical for any normal ruler from the ancient world. Cracks spread across its surface, and one side appeared shattered as though something violent had struck it long ago. Behind the throne was the discovery that immediately divided the researchers: a gigantic pair of horns. They were mounted against the wall, almost like a ceremonial display. Each horn curved outward several feet before twisting upward toward the ceiling. Their surface had partially fossilized over time, but traces of dark reddish discoloration still remained within the grooves. No one could immediately identify what creature they belonged to. Some believed they came from an extinct species of wild bull once native to Mesopotamia. Others disagreed. The proportions looked wrong. The base structure was too thick, the curvature too unnatural. One archaeologist reportedly described them as looking less like animal remains and more like something symbolic meant to imitate power. And throughout the chamber, the same image kept appearing again and again: a star falling from the heavens. The symbol was carved into pillars, etched into shattered pottery, even embedded into the floor around the throne itself. One damaged relief appeared to show a radiant figure descending from above, while groups of humans knelt beneath it with their arms raised. That was when some members of the translation team began quietly comparing the imagery to one particular passage, often associated with Lucifer. "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning." Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, not because they believed the cave proved the existence of a fallen angel, but because the symbolism was disturbingly similar. The deeper researchers examined the chamber, the more it resembled a place built not to worship a god, but to remember a being that had fallen. Near the base of the throne, another discovery emerged beneath layers of dirt and collapsed stone. Fragments of a crown, forged from blackened metal and decorated with sharp star-shaped engravings. Part of the inner ring appeared burned, as though exposed to extreme heat. Then came the detail that unsettled even the skeptics. The throne was not facing the entrance. It was facing upward, directly toward a long vertical crack in the ceiling, high above the chamber, where faint light from the surface barely filtered through the darkness. It almost looked intentional, as though whoever sat there had been positioned to stare toward the heavens themselves. And carved directly beneath the throne, partially hidden beneath centuries of sediment, archaeologists uncovered a line of ancient text. A rough translation reportedly read, "He who descended shall rise again when the river opens." The inscription beneath the throne changed the atmosphere inside the cave almost immediately. Up until that moment, many researchers still believed the discoveries beneath the Euphrates could eventually be explained as a mixture of mythology, ceremonial symbolism, and exaggerated interpretation. But the phrase mentioning the river opening deeply unsettled several members of the team because it directly echoed what had already happened above them. The Euphrates itself had receded before the cave was discovered. And that was when the excavation expanded beyond the chamber of the falling star. Not far from the throne room, archaeologists uncovered a partially collapsed corridor hidden behind layers of stone debris. The passage appeared intentionally sealed long ago. Large slabs had been stacked from floor to ceiling, almost as though someone had tried to block access to whatever lay beyond. When the final stones were removed, the team entered one of the most important discoveries in the entire cave system, an underground archive. The room stretched deep into the darkness, lined with broken shelves carved directly into the walls. Thousands of clay tablets lay scattered across the floor beneath centuries of dust and cave sediment. Many had cracked apart over time, but countless others remained astonishingly preserved in the dry underground environment beneath the Euphrates. Unlike the strange throne chamber, this place felt undeniably human. Oil lamps, writing tools, sealed jars, fragments of woven cloth. Everything about the room resembled a forgotten library hidden beneath the ancient world. For a brief moment, the expedition finally seemed grounded again in archaeology instead of nightmare. But the deeper they studied the tablets, the stranger the story became. Several writings matched known Babylonian and Akkadian records describing floods, celestial events, and dynasties lost to war. Others appeared connected to astronomical observations, mapping unusual movements of stars above Mesopotamia thousands of years ago. One damaged tablet even depicted the Euphrates, splitting into branching channels before reaching a massive black circle drawn beneath the river itself. The cave. Then came the repeated references to something called the four below. Not gods, not kings, not demons. The wording was strangely careful. One partially translated text described ancient priests traveling beneath the river to maintain the seals. Another warned that knowledge from the sky beings had corrupted kingdoms before a great destruction washed over the land. Some researchers immediately connected the writings to stories from the Book of Enoch about the Watchers, fallen beings who descended to humanity bringing forbidden knowledge. Others argued the texts were likely symbolic mythology created by Mesopotamian priesthoods influenced by regional flood traditions. But then another discovery complicated everything. At the far end of the archive room, buried beneath collapsed shelves, archaeologists uncovered a human skeleton seated upright against the wall. Unlike the ceremonial burials found elsewhere in Mesopotamia, this body appeared to have died alone while protecting the chamber. One skeletal hand still clutched a bundle of clay tablets against its chest. The other rested beside an extinguished oil lamp. And around the skull, researchers noticed a thin band of blackened metal, shaped almost like a crown of thorns. But it was the final tablet found beside the body that truly disturbed the translators. Unlike the others, the message was written larger and far more urgently, as though meant to be read quickly. A rough translation reportedly stated, If the river retreats, the path opens again, and the knowledge buried below will rise with it. And for the first time since entering the cave, several members of the expedition began asking a question no one had seriously considered before. What if this place had never been forgotten? What if it had been hidden on purpose? The idea that the cave had been intentionally hidden should have ended the expedition. Several members of the archaeological team reportedly wanted the deeper sections sealed until further analysis could be completed above ground. But by then, curiosity had already overtaken caution. Too many discoveries beneath the Euphrates were beginning to connect with one another. The symbols, the warnings, the repeated references to the four below. It no longer felt like isolated mythology scattered across different eras. It felt organized. And one particular tunnel continued drawing attention from the researchers more than any other. The passage marked by the symbol of wings surrounding an eye. Unlike the freezing air near the chamber of the falling star, this corridor felt strangely warm. The walls were covered with carvings far more detailed than anything discovered so far in the cave. Human figures appeared kneeling beneath towering beings descending from the sky. Some scenes showed stars above mountains. Others depicted groups of people receiving objects from the hands of these enormous figures, weapons, scrolls, strange instruments. As the team moved deeper into the tunnel, the carvings became increasingly disturbing. Several appeared to show humans changing physically after interacting with the beings from above. One mural even depicted oversized skeletons standing among ordinary people while flames and rivers surrounded them. Then the corridor opened into another massive chamber. This room was completely different from the throne chamber discovered earlier. There was no central seat, no symbols of kingship. Instead, the hall looked almost educational. Stone tables lined the walls. Circular markings covered the floor in patterns resembling astronomical diagrams. Large sections of the ceiling had been carved into maps of constellations, many surprisingly accurate despite their age. At the center of the chamber stood a tall pillar wrapped in engraved mathematical symbols and celestial measurements. One researcher reportedly described it as a place where knowledge was being passed down. That description immediately reminded several scholars of one specific name from the Book of Enoch, Samyaza. According to ancient traditions, Samyaza was believed to be the leader of the Watchers, the fallen beings who descended to Earth and taught humanity forbidden knowledge. Astronomy, weapons, secrets of the heavens. Knowledge humanity was supposedly never meant to possess. And suddenly, the imagery inside the chamber started feeling disturbingly similar. Near one of the stone tables, archaeologists uncovered a collection of metal rings connected by rotating joints. At first, the objects looked meaningless. But after reconstruction, researchers realized the device functioned almost like an ancient astronomical calculator capable of tracking planetary movement. The precision shocked the team. Nearby, another discovery waited beneath layers of collapsed debris. Bones. A nearly complete skeleton was uncovered, pressed against the wall near the center pillar. At first glance, it appeared human, but several proportions immediately stood out. The rib cage was unusually broad, the skull slightly elongated, and even lying partially collapsed. The remains appeared significantly larger than normal ancient human skeletons found throughout Mesopotamia. No official conclusion could be reached. Some argued genetic abnormalities or disease could explain the proportions. Others warned against sensationalism entirely. But rumors about giant remains beneath the Euphrates began spreading among local workers almost immediately. Yet the most unsettling discovery in the chamber was not the skeleton. It was the ceiling directly above it. Hidden within the star maps, archaeologists identified repeated symbols marking a specific celestial alignment. One translation expert later claimed the markings appeared to describe the moment The watchers descended. And beside that constellation pattern, another line of text had been carved deeply into the stone. Knowledge was given, and mankind was changed forever. For the first time, the cave no longer felt like a burial site or lost city beneath the Euphrates. It felt like a record. A memory of something ancient civilizations believed had truly happened there. And deeper beyond the Hall of Samyaza, the tunnel system continued descending further underground. The deeper tunnels beneath the Hall of Samyaza seemed older than everything discovered before it. The carved walls gradually disappeared, replaced by rough stone corridors, damp with moisture from somewhere far below the Euphrates. Dust no longer covered the ground in thick layers. Instead, the floor had turned soft and dark, packed with centuries of river sediment that had somehow settled deep beneath the cave system itself. And then the smell appeared. Not decay, not death. Just stagnant water and earth trapped underground for an impossibly long time. The passage narrowed sharply before opening into a chamber that immediately silenced the entire excavation team. Bodies, dozens of them, half buried in hardened mud beneath the cave floor. At first, researchers believed they had discovered another burial site, like many found across ancient Mesopotamia. But the arrangement of the remains quickly suggested something very different. These people had not been ceremonially buried one by one over time. They appeared to have died together. Many skeletons were piled against the walls as though trying to escape rising water. Others were found clutching children or curled tightly against the stone floor. Thick layers of mineral deposits covering several skulls indicated the chamber had once been completely flooded before eventually drying again. It looked less like a cemetery and more like the aftermath of a catastrophe. But several details inside the chamber disturbed archaeologists even more. Every body was facing the same direction, toward a massive stone doorway at the far end of the room. The entrance itself had long since collapsed, but strange carvings still remained visible above the broken frame. Human figures were shown kneeling before towering beings descending from above while waves swallowed the land around them. Flood imagery. Again. Some researchers immediately connected the scene to Mesopotamian flood myths like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Others pointed out how eerily similar the imagery felt to the biblical account of Noah and the corruption of humanity before the flood, especially when another discovery emerged. Several skeletons showed unusual physical abnormalities. A few skulls appeared elongated. Certain bones were significantly denser and larger than expected. One partially uncovered skeleton near the center of the chamber was nearly a head taller than the surrounding remains despite being seated. No official claims were made, but whispers inside the excavation grew louder. Theories about Nephilim, ancient hybrids, the offspring of the Watchers described in the Book of Enoch. Then the team uncovered something even stranger, buried beneath layers of river mud near the collapsed doorway. Chains. Not modern restraints, but massive oxidized links partially fused into the stone itself. Some were thick enough that no ordinary prisoner could realistically have worn them. The metal composition appeared heavily corroded, yet sections still carried traces of unusual black markings etched into the surface. Symbols. The same 4 symbols found in the central chamber. And among the bodies, archaeologists discovered small obsidian tokens placed carefully inside the hands of the dead. Each token carried one of the 4 markings: the falling star, the wings and eye, the spear-like emblem, and the insect shape. Almost like the dead had been separated into groups, or assigned to something. One translation expert later made a chilling observation after studying symbols near the doorway. The writings did not describe worship. They described fear. One damaged inscription roughly translated to, "The river rose to bury them below," and the gates were sealed so they would not return. For the first time since the cave had been discovered, some members of the expedition began openly questioning whether the chambers beneath the Euphrates had been built to honor the beings connected to the symbols or to imprison everything associated with them. The discovery of chains among the river graves changed the direction of the excavation once again. Until then, researchers still debated whether the symbols beneath the Euphrates represented mythology, priesthoods, or ancient rulers transformed into legend over time. But the repeated imagery of sealing, imprisonment, and corruption was becoming impossible to ignore, especially because one of the unexplored tunnels branching from the central chamber carried the same spear-like symbol found on the chains buried beside the dead. The tunnel descended sharply. Unlike the previous chambers, this passage showed signs of violent damage. Deep fractures split through the walls as though part of the cave had once collapsed under tremendous force. Black scorch marks stretched across the ceiling, and shattered stone littered the ground beneath layers of dust. Then came the first blade, half buried beneath rubble near the entrance. Even after centuries underground, its shape remained disturbingly intact. The sword was far too large for practical combat by an ordinary human. The handle alone required both hands to lift comfortably, while strange engravings spiraled along the darkened metal toward the broken tip. Nearby, archaeologists uncovered more weapons scattered throughout the chamber. Axes, spearheads, curved daggers, fragments of shields, and pieces of armor, unlike standard Mesopotamian military designs. This was not a temple, it was an armory. As excavation lights illuminated the wider chamber, the scale of the room became visible. Weapon racks carved directly into the walls stretched into the darkness. Many had collapsed long ago, leaving piles of rusted metal across the stone floor. But some artifacts remained shockingly preserved in the dry underground air beneath the Euphrates, and nearly every object carried the same symbol, the spear-like mark. One wall contained carvings unlike anything found elsewhere in the cave system. Human figures stood holding weapons while towering beings loomed behind them with outstretched arms. Fire descended from the sky above entire cities. Rivers were shown turning black while bodies covered the ground beneath scenes of war. Several researchers immediately connected the imagery to one name from the Book of Enoch, Aazil. According to ancient traditions and apocalyptic texts, Aazil was associated with forbidden knowledge, weapons, metalworking, warfare, and corruption brought down from heaven itself. Some accounts even described fallen beings teaching humanity the art of war and the creation of instruments never meant to exist. And beneath the Euphrates, the chamber seemed built entirely around that idea. Then came another discovery. Near the center of the armory stood a massive stone figure partially collapsed against the wall. The statue depicted a humanoid form with broad shoulders and broken wings folded behind its back. One arm had shattered away long ago, but in the remaining hand, the figure still gripped a long blade pointed downward toward the floor. At its feet lay dozens of smaller human skeletons, not arranged ceremonially, scattered, as though they had died in panic around the statue itself. Several skulls showed signs of violent trauma, cracked ribs, broken limbs. One shield fused to bone through centuries of mineral buildup. The entire scene looked less like an honored burial and more like the aftermath of a final stand. But the most unsettling object in the chamber was discovered sealed inside a collapsed stone container near the back wall, a chain. Unlike the corroded restraints found in the river graves, this one appeared strangely preserved. The metal remained dark and smooth despite its age, and portions of the links were engraved with symbols almost microscopic in detail. Some researchers claimed traces of unknown alloys may have been present, though no official findings were released publicly. The chain had been wrapped tightly around something no longer there, and carved directly into the floor beneath it was another inscription. What was given from the heavens brought ruin to the earth below. For many members of the expedition, the cave beneath the Euphrates no longer resembled mythology preserved underground. It was beginning to look like a warning deliberately buried beneath history itself. And somewhere deeper beyond the armory, the tunnel system continued descending toward levels no radar scan had fully mapped. By the time the expedition left the armory, the atmosphere beneath the Euphrates had completely changed. The excitement that once surrounded the discovery of the cave was gone. Conversations between researchers became quieter. Several local workers reportedly refused to continue descending after the discoveries connected to Aazil. Even experienced archaeologists admitted the deeper sections of the tunnel system no longer felt like ordinary ruins. And then the sounds began. At first, they were subtle, low vibrations echoing faintly through the stone beneath their feet. Some members of the team assumed the noises came from shifting rock or underground water pressure somewhere below the cave system. But the deeper they traveled, the more unnatural the sounds became. They were rhythmic, almost like breathing. Long, slow exhalations moving through the tunnels beneath the Euphrates, followed by deep vibrations that seemed to pulse through the walls themselves. In several recordings captured by equipment inside the cave, the sounds reportedly resembled distant growls layered beneath rushing air. No clear source could be identified. The tunnel carrying the final unexplored symbol, the insect-like marking, descended far steeper than any of the previous passages. The walls narrowed until researchers were forced to move in single file. Thick black residue-coated sections of the stone like burned oil, and the air became increasingly humid despite the cave's depth. Then the temperature changed. Without warning, pockets of intense heat began appearing throughout the tunnel. One moment, the air felt freezing. The next, it became almost suffocatingly hot. Instruments struggled to maintain stable readings. Some electronic devices briefly shut off entirely before restarting seconds later. And all the while, the breathing sounds continued. As the team pushed deeper underground, they discovered enormous circular stone formations carved into the tunnel walls. Each ring contained symbols matching the 4 markings found throughout the cave system. But unlike previous carvings, these symbols had been violently scratched over, almost as though someone had attempted to erase them or seal them. Then came the first collapse. A section of tunnel suddenly gave way behind part of the expedition team, trapping several researchers temporarily between falling debris and the narrowing passage. During the confusion, one camera operator reportedly captured footage of dust moving strangely through the darkness ahead, swirling in rhythmic bursts, matching the sound echoing through the tunnel. Breathing, not wind. Breathing. The footage was never officially released, but rumors surrounding it spread quickly among workers stationed near the Euphrates excavation site. Hours later, the team reached another chamber unlike any discovered before. The room was nearly empty. No throne, no weapons, no bodies. Only towering stone pillars arranged in a perfect circle around a massive vertical shaft descending into darkness below. The opening was so deep that powerful lights failed to reveal the bottom. When researchers dropped equipment into the pit, several devices lost signal before impact sounds could even be recorded. But surrounding the shaft itself were chains. Gigantic ones. Some remained attached to iron-like restraints embedded directly into the stone floor around the abyss. Others hung broken along the edges of the pit as though something immense had once been held there. And above the shaft, carved repeatedly into the surrounding pillars, archaeologists uncovered a phrase written across multiple ancient languages. "The bound shall remain beneath the river." The wording immediately reminded several scholars of a passage from Revelation 9 describing angels bound near the Euphrates, awaiting an appointed time. Not because anyone believed the cave literally proved prophecy. but because the parallels were becoming impossible to ignore. Then came the moment that forced the expedition to stop completely. As one researcher leaned over the edge of the shaft to lower another camera system into the darkness, a deep sound suddenly rose from below. Not an echo, not shifting stone, something else. The vibration was so powerful, it reportedly shook dust loose from the pillars surrounding the chamber. Multiple workers stumbled backward. One technician later described the sound as something waking up beneath us. And seconds later, the breathing stopped. The silence that followed the sound from the abyss was somehow worse than the noise itself. No one inside the chamber spoke for several seconds. Dust still drifted through the air around the massive shaft, while the broken chains hanging above it slowly swayed back and forth. Some members of the expedition wanted to leave the cave immediately. Others argued the vibration could still be explained naturally. Underground pressure shifts, collapsing rock, deep seismic activity beneath the Euphrates basin. But before the team could retreat, another discovery changed everything again. One of the side passages connected to the abyss chamber had remained hidden behind a collapsed section of stone. The vibration from below had partially broken the wall apart, revealing a narrow opening large enough for a person to squeeze through. And carved above the entrance was the final symbol, the insect-like marking. Unlike the other tunnels, this passage smelled unbearable from the moment researchers entered. The air was thick, humid, and filled with a sour odor that several workers compared to decay mixed with sulfur. Strange black stains covered the walls, while clusters of dead insects littered the floor beneath layers of dust. Then the movement started. At first, only small things. Tiny pale creatures scattering between cracks in the stone whenever lights passed over them. But deeper inside the tunnel, entire swarms of insects began emerging from the darkness. Beetles, long-legged cave insects, and pale-winged creatures unlike anything the local workers recognized. Many appeared blind. Some were already dead. Others covered sections of the walls so densely they almost looked like moving shadows. The deeper chamber beyond the tunnel was one of the most disturbing spaces yet discovered beneath the Euphrates. The ceiling was completely blackened, not by smoke, but by layers upon layers of insect remains fused into the stone over centuries. Massive pillars lined the room, each carved with twisted winged figures whose faces had been deliberately chipped away long ago. At the center stood an altar, not a throne, not a grave, an altar. Dark stains spread outward from its base across channels carved into the floor. Nearby, archaeologists uncovered dozens of ceramic containers sealed with hardened resin. When several were carefully opened, traces of organic material and insect remains were found packed inside, offerings or rituals. Then came the statue. Hidden behind one of the pillars, researchers uncovered a towering stone figure unlike anything found in the previous chambers. The body resembled a man draped in layered robes, but its head was partially insect-like, with wide hollow eyes and structures resembling folded wings extending backward. Most disturbing of all, a crown of horn-like protrusions rose from the figure's head. The symbolism immediately reminded scholars of one ancient name repeatedly connected throughout history to corruption, decay, and swarms: Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. Some researchers argued the chamber likely represented an ancient fertility or plague cult shaped by local mythology over time. Others pointed to how insect imagery across Mesopotamian history was often associated with disease, death, and divine punishment. But beneath the Euphrates, the atmosphere inside the chamber felt far darker than symbolism alone. Then one final discovery was made near the altar. A massive sealed stone slab buried beneath collapsed debris. Unlike previous inscriptions, this one appeared intentionally hidden. Its surface carried all four symbols found throughout the cave system, arranged into a single circle surrounding one central line of text. The translation reportedly took hours. When it was finally completed, silence spread through the chamber once again. Because the inscription did not speak about worship. It spoke about containment. The four were bound below the river until the appointed opening of the earth. And beneath that line, another sentence had been carved more deeply than all the others. Do not descend beyond the final gate. But according to ground scans taken inside the chamber, there was still one level of the cave system remaining beneath them. One final structure hidden below the Euphrates. And whatever existed there had been sealed deeper than everything else. The warning should have ended the expedition beneath the Euphrates. By that point, the discoveries inside the cave had already crossed far beyond normal archaeology. Entire chambers connected to ancient legends of fallen beings. Mass graves buried beneath flood sediment. Weapons, astronomical records, chains surrounding an abyss, and repeated inscriptions speaking not about worship, but imprisonment. And now there was one final instruction carved into stone. Do not descend beyond the final gate. But human curiosity has always been strongest where warnings exist, especially when something is hidden. Ground scans taken inside the chamber of Beielub revealed a massive hollow structure directly beneath the floor, larger than any previous room discovered in the cave system. The readings suggested a perfectly geometric space surrounded by unusually dense stone walls, almost as though the entire level had been intentionally isolated from the rest of the underground network. No natural explanation fully accounted for it, and so the excavation continued. Near the rear wall of the chamber, researchers eventually uncovered a narrow, descending staircase buried beneath collapsed debris and insect remains. Unlike the rough tunnels above, these steps appeared almost untouched by time. The stone was smoother, darker. In some places, the walls reflected light faintly, despite being coated in centuries of dust. But one detail immediately disturbed the team. There were no carvings anymore, no murals, no symbols, no writings. The deeper they descended beneath the Euphrates, the more the cave became completely silent and empty, as though all decoration and history had intentionally stopped above this level. Then the staircase ended, and the final structure came into view. A gigantic stone door. It stood embedded directly into the cavern wall, easily several stories tall. Massive cracks spread across its surface, but the structure itself remained sealed. 4 circular indentations were carved into the center of the door, each bearing one of the symbols found throughout the cave system: the falling star, the winged eye, the spear, and the insect mark. All 4 together. For the first time, chains thicker than a human body stretched across the entrance, disappearing deep into the surrounding rock. Some had snapped long ago. Others remained tightly anchored into the stone floor beneath layers of black residue resembling ash. Then came the discovery that unsettled even the skeptics: heat. The closer researchers moved toward the gate, the warmer the air became. Thermal equipment detected rising temperatures from behind the sealed structure despite the immense depth beneath the river. Some sections of the stone door were measurably hotter than the surrounding cave walls. And then the sounds returned. Not the slow breathing heard near the abyss. Something lower, more distant. Almost like several voices speaking beneath moving water. One audio specialist later claimed fragments of the recordings sounded strangely rhythmic, though no words could be identified. Another member of the expedition refused to continue after hearing the noises through headphones, reportedly describing them as not echoes, not human, like something trying to answer us. The team attempted to map the area surrounding the gate and soon discovered another chilling detail. The structure was not built to keep people out. Every chain anchor, every reinforcement, every layer of surrounding stone had been positioned from the outside facing inward. The gates had been sealed to keep something inside. Then one final inscription was discovered hidden beneath centuries of soot near the bottom of the door. Unlike the earlier warnings, this message was carved with deep, violent strokes, as though written in desperation. The translation spread quietly through the expedition team. The river was chosen because the depths could hide them. The seals were made because mankind could not destroy them. And beneath that line, one final sentence. If the gate opens, the world above will remember why they were buried. No official reports were ever released describing what happened next beneath the Euphrates. Because, according to several workers involved in the excavation, the final discovery was never fully documented. The door had already started cracking open on its own. If the reports surrounding the final gate are true, then the story of the cave beneath the Euphrates did not end with discovery. It ended with silence. In the weeks that followed, information surrounding the excavation reportedly became increasingly difficult to verify. Some local workers claimed military vehicles began appearing near the restricted zone after rumors spread about the cracking doorway beneath the river. Others said portions of the cave system were suddenly sealed off without explanation. Several videos and photographs connected to the expedition briefly surfaced online before disappearing almost as quickly as they appeared. And yet, none of that changed the deeper questions surrounding the discoveries. What exactly had been hidden beneath the Euphrates for thousands of years? Because, taken individually, every discovery inside the cave could still have a logical explanation. The giant horns in the chamber of the falling star could belong to an extinct species or ceremonial symbolism tied to forgotten kings. The astronomical chamber connected to Samyaza may simply reflect ancient Mesopotamian knowledge, later mythologized into stories about heavenly beings. The armory of Aazil could represent humanity's long relationship with war and the fear surrounding forbidden technology. Even the temple of Beielub may have been nothing more than a plague cult buried beneath history over time. And the final gate? Perhaps just another sealed structure from a lost civilization beneath the Euphrates River. But what continues to disturb people is not one artifact alone. It is the pattern. Every chamber connected to the next. Every symbol repeated across different eras. Every inscription speaking about sealing, corruption, descent, and something bound beneath the river itself. And perhaps most unsettling of all, many of the warnings inside the cave appeared connected not to the past, but to a future moment when the Euphrates would retreat and expose what had once been hidden. A detail many people immediately linked to Revelation chapter 16, verse 12. And the sixth angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up. For centuries, passages like these were viewed only as prophecy, symbolism, or religious imagery. But after the river began receding in real life, exposing ruins, tunnels, and discoveries never meant to be seen again, the parallels suddenly felt far more unsettling to many observers around the world. Still, no evidence proves fallen angels literally existed beneath the Euphrates. No official report confirms supernatural findings, and that may be exactly why the story continues spreading. Because uncertainty creates fear far more effectively than certainty ever could. The cave beneath the Euphrates sits in that terrifying space between archaeology and mythology, between history and prophecy, between what ancient civilizations believed and what modern humanity is still trying to explain. Maybe the chambers were only symbolic. Maybe the warnings were ritualistic attempts to control knowledge and power. Or maybe ancient people buried something they believed should never rise again. And if that final door truly has begun opening beneath the Euphrates River, then the most frightening part of this story may not be what archaeologists already discovered underground, but what they stopped themselves from finding next. Are we in the end times? The liturgical calendar begins with the season of Advent and culminates in the celebration of Christ the King. The lectionary appropriately corresponds to these settings. While a new liturgical year begins with much from the prophets, especially Isaiah, featuring themes of waiting and coming, the weeks that precede it carry a different tone. As the liturgical year nears its end, the lectionary follows with readings about the end, that is, the end of all things, most notably found in the book of Revelation. We've just now entered the season of Advent on the heels of readings about mystical visions, heavenly scrolls, cities falling, and a lamb reigning. After hearing such things, we might be wondering, what did that all mean? In this article, I attempt to answer that question by bringing the reader into a deeper love and familiarity with what God reveals to us in this fascinating conclusion to the biblical drama. Pandemics, politics, scandals, massacres, natural disasters. It is not difficult to wonder either from a religious or a secular position. Are we, in fact, witnessing the end times of the world around us? Although the world has always been a troubled place, the 21st century has already seen what seems to be an especially large number of calamities. Perhaps it has always been this chaotic, and the emergence of mass media has only made us more aware. In either case, there is no denying the tumultuous character of the present world. That gives sufficient reason to pause and consider if there lies a deeper narrative to the crescendo of tragedies occurring all around us. To the biblically formed mind, there is indeed a deeper narrative underwriting the events of the world. YHWH, Lord in our English Bibles, the God of creation, enfleshed before our eyes in Jesus Christ, has put into motion a saving plan for his creation, a rescue mission to redeem his chosen race, renew the whole of creation, and dwell with mankind in a newly united heaven and earth, cf. Rev 21:22. At the climax of those divine writings, i.e., the Bible, which reveal this drama of creation, salvation, and redemption, is a mysterious and exciting account of the end of this creation as we know it, detailed in a book we commonly know as Revelation, or the Apocalypse. Throughout this book are seemingly countless episodes of natural disasters, wicked rulers, and pandemic-like plagues that run amok, all of them issued as various expressions of God's judgment and function as catalysts that move the narrative along to the end that is coming soon, Rev 22:7. They are events that, even to the secular reader, can be jarringly similar to events of the world around us today. What is the modern reader supposed to make of these connections? Are they mere coincidences? Or, dare we ask, are they indicative of something more imminent? These questions call for a careful study of Revelation, grounded in prayer, though this, to no one's surprise, can be a daunting task. Many individuals throughout history have attempted to do this very thing in order to make sense of the world around them, and they did so with often disastrous results. As G.K. Chesterton once wrote, though saint, John the Evangelist saw many strange monsters in his vision. He saw no creature so wild as one of his own commentators. One biblical scholars, Ochtemeyer, Green, and Thompson, developed this issue in greater detail, observing. Perhaps no NT document simultaneously engages the imagination of its readers and frustrates their understanding as much as Revelation, the last book in the canon. No book is quite so intense, vivid, full of material to engage the senses, and enigmatic to its readers. Its mysterious puzzles have opened the floodgates for all sorts of imaginative and fanciful interpretations, some that stretch the imagination far beyond anything found in the book itself. But the exotic features of the book of Revelation are less responsible for outlandish interpretations of it than are the mistaken expectations so often brought to it by its modern readers. Because commentators past and present have assumed that their own experience and contemporary events of their world will unlock its secrets, Revelation has been interpreted in light of everything from the Reformation, atomic weapons, and the European Union. Ironically, however, the more commentators have sought to make the book relevant by applying its prophecies to their own times, places, and situations, the more they have missed the paths that lead to genuine understanding and appreciation of the power of this mysterious book. The task of reading Revelation well, with the mind of the church, is not to be taken lightly. The aim of this essay is to treat selected examples from the Apocalypse as signs of the end times, as well as assessing the question of whether we find ourselves in the so-called end times now or not. Before doing this, though, it is necessary to provide a brief but foundational understanding of the book as a whole, so that the ideas we develop later will have solid footing. Sometimes it takes the sky to see what's on the ground. In his book, Theology and Sanity, Frank Sheed gives a somewhat startling but effective depiction of what it means to behold something as beautiful. He maintains that something is only perceived as beautiful when it is received in its appropriate context, that is, in its place, in the totality to which it belongs. A patch of cloth, for example, can be unappealing, tasteless even, until it is observed within the pattern of a quilt. A tree by itself is hardly excitable, yet a forest can be breathtaking. Sheed uses the example of the human eye. The human eye is very beautiful, as all lovers have seen. But the most ardent lover might find it hard to recapture his emotion if the lady, taking his praise of her eye too literally, decided to present it to him on a plate. The eye needs to be seen in the face. Its beauty, its meaning, its usefulness all come from its position in the face. And one who had seen eyes only on plates would never really have known them at all. However minutely he might have examined the eye, thus unhappily removed from its living context. The same principle of beauty applies equally to the study of sacred scripture. Unless a word, verse, chapter, or even an entire book is understood within a larger contextual framework, it is stripped of its beauty and can be made meaningless, or worse, even dangerous. This is largely why Revelation has become an abandoned book by many Bible readers. Its images and depictions of the end times have been plucked out and isolated, taken away from their contextual beauty, and twisted to purport dangerous and wild beliefs about current affairs or the end of the world. Like a grape plucked off its vine and left to shrivel, these wild interpretations often come with a sour taste, dissuading its consumers from ever returning for more. This is why Revelation, perhaps more than any other biblical book, stands in most need of careful study and prayer so as to provide its proper spiritual and literary context. And much like the quilt or forest, the most helpful place to start is not by picking apart its verses and chapters, but by observing its message from an aerial view, that is, its larger context. Since the length of this essay does not afford the room for a thorough treatment of how to read Revelation, I will simply propose here at the outset what I am convinced to be the single most effective key to unlocking the meaning of this mysterious book. Revelation is about the cross. Are we in the end times? Concerning the end, are we in the end times? Well, yes and no. A truly Catholic answer, no. If by end we mean that, in real time, say within the next generation, the second coming of Christ will take place, and we will witness firsthand the heavens and earth being renewed. Then no, this is not what I mean by the end. If by end we mean everything that takes place after the cross of Christ, then yes. I believe that the church under Caesar Nero was just as much in the end times as the church of the 21st century finds herself to be today. I remain convinced that no matter how studied a reader one may be of Revelation, it is necessary to take for face value the words of our Lord concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven nor the Son, but the Father only. For the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Matt 24:36-44. To think that one can crack the code of Revelation and predict the time of the second coming is to make a mockery of the words of our Lord. We must not think of the end as depicted in terms of times and locations, but as characterized by the cosmic battle between good and evil, between the cross and all who stand opposed to it. One day, that cosmic battle will indeed end at a certain time and in a certain place. Whether that will be in the next generation or the next 1,000 generations, I leave that to God's mercy and wisdom.